There were two things that I really needed. The first was information on my city from people I trusted. Where do you live? Which bank do you join? What's a TV license? And then the second piece was, how do you recreate your network from scratch?
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. This episode is powered by J Ventures, a community-driven VC fund in Silicon Valley, and is sponsored by Leumi Tech, Hippo Insurance, Turing, Upwest Labs, and Hillel at Stanford. For episode 275, I'm honored to have with us Lynn Greenberg, the founder and CEO of Pivt Enterprise. Lynn is the founder and CEO of Pivt, a social app designed to reduce turnover and improve the well-being of relocated, remote, and transient employees. Prior, Lynn worked at Bloomberg LP in London and then as a senior associate at Autonomy Ventures, where she procured startup deal flow, managed teams, and drove value creation for portfolio companies. She currently serves as the VP of Panels for the New York venture community, the NYVC, and mentors and advises at Women in Business and Yeshiva University, Astia Angels, London and Partners, and Athletic Venture Advisors.
Lynn Greenberg, thank you so much for joining me. How are you?
Thank you for having me, Michael. I'm doing well.
Wonderful.
Staying healthy and safe in Tel Aviv, I hope.
Yep. Staying safe and healthy. You know, we're at a lockdown now, but it's great because I get to still talk to you over this wonderful platform. So thank you for making the time to do this. What I'm especially excited to talk about is your insight into the remote working, employee turnaround, satisfaction, happiness, success, whatever it may be. I think that it's a fascinating field to be in, especially in 2020, even though you started all the way back in 2017, I believe, with Pivt. But before that, I want to go all the way back to the early days. You've done a multitude of fascinating things from venture capital to advising and panels to now being the co-founder and CEO. But you're also a soccer player, right?
I was.
Tell me about that. How do you turn? Yeah.
I always loved sports. I think, part of it was, I grew up with two brothers. And so, was always surrounded by it and really enjoyed it. But I also really loved being on a team and being exposed to different types of people. And, the lessons that I learned as an athlete certainly coincide with, what I deal with on an everyday basis as a founder. So really grateful for that. I wish I got to play a little bit more than I do right now. But hopefully, in 2021, we'll be able to pick it back up again.
I love that. So taking back to 2017, you come up with this idea for Pivt, and you're the founder and CEO. What is Pivt? What are some insights that you've accumulated from your past experiences that bring you to this realization?
Yeah, so this actually will go back all the way to when I graduated from college. And 3 weeks later, I relocated to London to work for Bloomberg. And I was 21 years old, didn't know anyone, and faced the issue that all people do when moving to a new and unfamiliar place, which is, how do you go about making your new city feel like home? And there were two things that I really needed. The first was information on my city from people I trusted. Where do you live? Which bank do you join? What's a TV license? And then the second piece was, how do you recreate your network from scratch? Because as anyone that moves knows, it's friends you need the most when you're adjusting to a new and unfamiliar place. So this was something that I was just curious about, spoke to other expats at Bloomberg London, which is the international hub, and found that it was a much bigger problem than just myself. Went on, dating apps, tried Meetup, tried Facebook groups. Nothing really seemed to, fill the void. And so started taking classes, to try to figure out a way to solve this problem. And so, long story short, we launched Pivt in 2017 as a consumer app for people moving and traveling to help acclimate in their new city. We were launched on the App Store and Google Play in New York and London for about 6 months. We had 10,000 users when we started getting approached by corporations. And they said, we came across your platform, love what you're building. It's actually something we're struggling with internally with our relocated employees and business travelers. Is this something you'd be interested in building for businesses? So we went back to the drawing board, and what we found was that actually corporations on average spend about $90,000 relocating a single employee. Much more if you're an executive, much more if you're
$90,000 for one
relocating
employee?
with a family. Exactly. Yep. And because there's no social component helping these people acclimate, about a third of those people quit their job within a year or move back home because of social reasons. So when we found that out, we refactored our app to fit a business model, and that's what we've been working on ever since.
Unbelievable. Walk me through the journey of getting this product market fit and validation from another avenue, right? And literally pivoting your company Pivt to that. As the CEO, was that a difficult decision, an easy decision? What was going on over there?
It's always a difficult decision when you make something from so much apart from first of all, a part of something that you went through personally, and then put so much heart and soul into to saying, okay, maybe we should, pivot and go in a different direction. But certainly what I learned through venture capital and as being a founder is you have to stay very true to your mission, but you need to listen to your customers and you need to be able to, adjust, very quickly. And if you can't, then you're not going to survive. And so, our goal has always been to give people a platform where they could take, life-changing opportunities in unfamiliar places and expand their outlooks without thinking twice. And so this started out being, on a consumer app for business travelers, backpackers, relocated employees. But ultimately, what we came to realize was we would be able to do this more efficiently if we went over to a business-to-business solution. And, it would just be a different way to go to market.
So tell me a little bit about what's happening today in terms of relocations more tangibly. So I understand that, on average, businesses spend a humongous amount of money on helping their employees relocate. But what are some of the really core challenges that Pivt thinks it can help solve in that domain to make it easier for both the employees, but also the employers?
Yeah, so this is something that we've been spending a lot of our time on through COVID is really just, understanding what this new normal is going to look like and the new concerns of our clients. And so there's a couple of things. The first thing is that 1 in 5 Americans have relocated or know someone that has relocated due to COVID. And, a lot of that is because of the change in the work environment. And so we're in the beginning stages of testing out whether, because employee benefits like happy hour and unlimited snacks in the office and office space is no longer really relevant, if something like Pivt, is something that these employers want to give to their employees that are, socially isolated and relocating so frequently. So that's the first thing that we're tapping into is, do we have a place in this work from anywhere environment, which we think we do. The other interesting component is we've been speaking with, heads of global mobility around the world. We spoke with, the head of global mobility at Apple. And we said to him, are you guys thinking of, working remotely when all of this is said and done? And he said, no, for 2 reasons. The first is it's really difficult to create a strong company culture digitally. And the second is, how do you train employees, from a digital standpoint? And so actually what we've been seeing is from the relocation standpoint, the relocation management companies have seen an increase in RFPs during this. So we're finding that companies are taking this time to reevaluate their strategies, and relocation is very much a part of the mix when things get to be safe. So very few have been halted. More so, there's a larger backlog for when it's safe to travel. So, I do think that, people are going to return to the office. I think that it's going to be, a little bit more flexible in regards to how many days a week you spend in the office. But I do think relocations are going to move as scheduled. And I think it's going to increase in the sense that, I think people's working habits is going to allow them and to live in, much different types of ways and in places around the world. And I think that, employers are going to have to cater to that in their benefits.
That makes a lot of sense. So what does Pivt actually do? What would I experience as an employee relocating and having my employer enroll me, I guess, in Pivt and the services? So what experience would I be getting which would help me make the new place like home and potentially have less churn with my existing company?
Yeah, so from a relocation standpoint, we can take my example. So I was moving from New York to London. Essentially, how it would work is as soon as I found out that I was moving, I'd get access to Pivt. We also get free access to family members because actually 70% of relocations fail, not because the actual employee has difficulty acclimating, but because of the spouse and, the family members.
That makes perfect sense.
Exactly. That's the first part of the mix. So they could open up Pivt, using my example, New York to London. You could open our Find Network feature, which shows you all of our relocated and mobile employees around the world. So whether you're with Pepsi or HSBC or a small startup, everyone is on the same platform. You could search London up top ahead of your move, see who's there, and then filter it down to find, people that are from your hometown, university, workplace, same language, also moving with a family, all for the purpose of getting, the most trusted information and connecting with people who you may want to meet socially. And then the second feature that we have is a community messaging platform, which connects people based on interests, goals, and passions. So everything from moving with a family to London, to New York Knicks fans in London, to vegans in London. And this is actually a place where you can ask and give recommendations, create events and gatherings, and connect based on general discussion.
Right. So is the network that you're building within Pivt, is that mainly, is the network effect mainly relocated people helping other relocated people, or is there also an incentive for the average person that works in a similar industry to perhaps be on the platform? Because if I move now, let's say to London, I want to meet, I guess, to have as many people to potentially meet or to have common interests with, right?
Exactly. And so, the more people that we speak to, and of course, what we found on our consumer app was the fact of the matter is, as an adult, it's difficult to meet new friends a lot of times. And so, this goes way beyond our core need, which we feel is the biggest pain point, which is among relocated employees. But we're also seeing this, and we've been asked from day one to extend it to business travelers. Maybe you're not a relocated employee, but you're a consultant that's spending 5 days a week in a new city, and you face a lot of the same issues that relocated employees do. Or now, maybe you're a work from anywhere employee now, and you're relocating on your own. Those are, especially now where you're not meeting people at bars and you're not attending gatherings, what can employers do to give you that sense of community wherever you are in the palm of your hands? For a low price.
That makes perfect sense. So what are some of the, really surprising things that you've learned as you observe, the consumer behavior through Pivt? Because I think that's a really fascinating place to examine that, most companies don't necessarily have the data to even look at.
So that's just it. So I think the most interesting thing that I've found when moving over to B2B is that there's just a lack of KPIs and metrics around success. So you'll ask the head of global mobility at some large organizations, what does a successful post look like? And they won't necessarily be able to tell you. It's not necessarily based around churn. It's not necessarily based around, how successful they are in terms of production. And so one of the things that we started working on through COVID is we brought on a social network scientist, and we're working with a couple of academics that study the future of work. And the purpose of that is taking their past research and saying, okay, what can we do based on what you guys have learned and what we see to create the first human success formula using Pivt. So our whole theory is that, moving people and moving things from A to B is very self-explanatory, but the human side is left through the cracks. And that's why there's such a big hole. And so we're trying to create a formula on Pivt where we can say to employers, if your employees do A before they move and X and Y, within 6 months after they move, then we can predict that they'll be 20% more successful in their post. And here are the KPIs that will gauge success. And so I think that's one of the biggest things, that I found was that, this didn't exist. And I think it's just going to create, a whole new sense of crystallization and will help in well-being, substantially.
No, that sounds that makes perfect sense to me. If you can imagine or paint a world, 5, 10 years from now of how people experience their relocation, whether it's with Pivt inside or without it, but what is this ideal situation that where an employee would experience a fruitful relocation?
So as I said from the beginning, the mission is always to create a platform where people can take life-changing opportunities without thinking twice. Social problems should not be a concern. And so the idea is to give them Pivt and to give them a formula and to give them a sense of community wherever they are. Ultimately, what we're trying to solve is that sense of belonging. Because, feeling at home is really feeling like you belong. And belonging is not necessarily fitting in. Belonging is really, in our minds, feeling like you can be who you are wherever you are and feel comfortable with that person.
Right.
And so I think if you can unlock that, wherever people are, I think there can be, much bigger implications and I think it could be really impactful.
That makes perfect sense, and it's very, very insightful. Thank you, Lynn. I have to ask, you've been part of so many different organizations as a mentor, as a strategic advisor. What were the biggest takeaways that you take from the mentorship side now to being perhaps the mentee side? Things patterns that you've observed throughout your journey that other young founders are doing. Now you're experiencing yourself. So how does the puzzle piece together?
Yeah, it's really interesting, and part of the reason why I mentor is because I feel so fortunate that I've been able to make a lot of mistakes as a founder and see a lot made as an investor. I was an investor before I started Pivt, for that reason of kind of learning the other side of things, what makes startups tick, what makes them fail. And it's different as much as you learn it from the other side. When you do it as an entrepreneur, it's from a whole different lens. And so, I could go on for days of the number of lessons learned, that I've experienced. But as I said before, I think one of the main things is, being on your toes in the sense of staying true to your mission, but being able to adapt quickly to new customer needs. Really being able to can't emphasize enough staying, really close to your customers. For our consumer app specifically, we built out features that required money and time that didn't need to be spent. Just thinking because we had gone through it and that's something that we wanted, that's something that everyone wanted. And, really encourage people to, create kind of customer support groups and whatnot, and really keep a close tab on what they want, what they need, what they're doing, really find out whatever you can about them.
That's incredible. No, that's That's definitely very, very wise, and I'm looking forward to taking those lessons and implementing them on my own venture someday. Lynn, I also want to thank you for being so generous with your time. I think that what you're doing with Pivt is fantastic, and I can't see the world going back to anything close to what it was before. I'm presuming that relocation is just going to magnify this understanding that people can work from various locations, and a lot of perhaps families or single people that have thought about relocating or living different experiences, whether it's for personal reasons or family reasons, they'll be able to venture out and do so. There will be opportunity for all of that, and I think that providing a safe space for them to do that, where they can be both nurtured in a new community and a new environment through an app like Pivt, and provide them a network of people that can make the new place feel more like home. I think that's extremely smart, and the part about going back to the companies, providing those KPIs and those insights into helping them keep and maintain those employees that are relocating. I think that's just incredible. So Lynn, thank you very, very much. And before we end, I have to ask you the most important question, which is 3 words that you would use to describe yourself.
Oh, that's tough. I would say that everyone that knows me in the industry would probably say that I'm, determined, very passionate, and trustworthy.
I love that. Lynn, thank you. Have a great time with Pivt. Continue making a positive impact, and stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you so much. And to you, Michael, thank you for having me.